Thank you, everybody, for a really wonderful participation so far today. And thank you to Senator Rosen for her passionate speech and all the work that she does. And we have another Jewish senator with us now in conversation, Norm Coleman. Senator Coleman served in the US Senate representing Minnesota from 2003 to 2009, and prior to that served as mayor of St. Paul, Minnesota. And he now serves as the chair of the Republican Jewish Coalition. Would you please join me in welcoming Senator Coleman? So many questions for you, Senator Coleman. I'm really looking forward to this. Uniquely, you have served representing the Midwest. You have been in a unique position of observing and combating anti-Semitism, coming from a different time in our political life. As we've all heard today, it's so important that to be successful, that we are truly bipartisan and in broad coalitions. Given your experience, would you share with us how you've done that in the past, what you see for the future, what you think we should be doing?
Well, thank you. First, let me start by just thanking everybody for being here. You know, they say in politics, the world belongs to those who show up. You've showed up, and now you're being asked to show up again and again and again. By the way, not just in Washington. I think we'll talk about this a little later, but in your local communities. Not everything is taken. I was a mayor for 8 years before I was a senator. I tell people I may have senator in front of my name. I have mayor stitched in my underwear. I have too much information. But you know, at the local level, you can get things done. You know, at times Washington is a debating society, so when you leave here, hopefully energized, which I'm sure you will be, there's a lot of work to be done. A lot of work to be done at home, and I think that creates the environment, makes a difference. First, being a mayor, you know, there isn't a partisan way. In St. Paul, if you didn't plow the streets when it snows, and it's snowed about 6 months of the year, you heard about it. You know, you go buy a loaf of bread and you're in the grocery and you hear about it. And so you're really forced to focus on how do I solve problems? How do I get things? Apple Watches, so you got to turn them off. And let me just say, you know, you said I served 2000 as mayor from 93 to 2002, senator up through 2009. We've gotten much more divided since then. Washington is a much more divided place. I'm just thrilled to see Ted Deutsch and Jackie Rosen and Brian Mast, for this group to bring together senators on both sides of the aisle. Anti-Semitism should be a uniting issue, and it isn't always, and we need to discuss that candidly. But if this should not be a partisan issue. And by the way, support for Israel should not be a partisan issue. But I do have to say that there are forces, though, that make this challenging. Israel today is when I grew up in Israel, it was, you know, this country that was besieged, surrounded by hostile neighbors, and their future was unsure. And today, Israel is seen as a giant, a military power, an economic power, center of technology. And so Israel becomes the Goliath, and the Palestinians become the David. Israel is seen as the oppressor, and that first of all is simply wrong. It's not reality. We are an oppressed people. We know what it's like. We know from the numbers on the forearms of our grandparents and great-grandparents. We know it from our history. And I just think we have to do a better job of kind of getting away from this kind of sense of Israel as the oppressor, and understand that there is a place for Jews in the world, that there is a Jewish state, and that's a good thing, and it is a needed thing. And so the easy part of fighting anti-Semitism is we all will condemn the attacks on the rabbi in front of the Chabad day school, or the attacks on diners sitting out and you know, wearing a yarmulke and people saying things, or Proud Boys marching in Charlottesville saying Jews will not replace it. We should easily condemn those things. But when it comes to Israel, we have to talk about what is anti-Semitism. For me, to say Zionism is racism is anti-Semitism. To me, and I'll just end on this note, no filibuster here, but, but for me, if your opposition is BDS is to destroy the Jewish state, that's anti-Semitism. If you proclaim Palestine from river to sea, meaning the destruction of the Jewish state, the Jewish people, that's anti-Semitism. And so one of the challenges we have is getting a common definition so that my friends on the left and those on the right, Republicans and Democrats, can all agree this is what we're looking at, this is wrong, and together, we need to fight it.
Thank you for that. Very, very important message. And, you know, since you brought up messaging and since the panel after us is actually about media, I'd love to get your thoughts. You had served at a time of maybe slower media, more traditional media, and now we're in a phase of a mile a minute messaging at 140 or 260 characters, and that simplifies things. How has that made it more complicated for legislators, and can communities do anything to address that?
Well, the answer has to be yes. Nothing's hopeless. Is it a more challenging environment? You know, and my daughter works for Snapchat. I think I'm the post-65 demographic of Snapchat. Just me, I think, that knows Snapchat. But in a world in which, you know, a single tweet can destroy a business, a world in which somebody is because they're Jewish, because of their faith, all of a sudden is subject to all sorts of doxing and terrible things, it is more challenging. It is more challenging, which just means that we have to be better at what we do, that we have to be, I keep getting back to, you know, showing up. I don't think, you can't seed the universe, you can't seed the field, so you got to be out there responding, you got to be out there challenging, you got to be out there educating. And by the way, that may be the biggest issue, and that's not so, you know, I worry about our kids coming out of colleges and universities and what they're learning. My son, who's now 34, but when he was in college, he called me one day and said, "Dad, I just had a fight with my political science professor because he said Israel's an apartheid state," and I took him on. I don't know how it's going to affect my grade, but I took him on. If young people are coming out of schools, colleges, being taught that Israel is an apartheid state, you may not like every policy of Israel, you may disagree with it. But again, if you're looking to destroy the Jewish state, then you got to deal with that. So long answer, short question, it is more challenging today. There's so many more forms of media. It's just so much more instantaneous. In my world, we used to, spend money on TV commercials. I tell people, do social media. And these campaigns, hundreds of $millions are being spent in social media. So the bottom line is that we can't ignore the changing playing field. We can't cede the field to the bad guys, bad men and women. We need to engage. We need to have good messaging. And listen, there are enough of us. Our moms didn't raise dumb kids. There are enough of us here who knows how to handle and do those things, and I think we can be prepared to engage.
I know a few of them in the audience, so hopefully you're listening, and we need volunteers. Senator, you mentioned, I'm from New York, so it was the pothole issues. You mentioned the snow plowing issues, right? But what it gets me thinking about is the importance of local advocacy. The federation system, as you know, we're both national and local. And so we're able to really engage at both levels. And what is most helpful in the community engagement with state officials and with up-and-coming officials, and what tools are most useful?
Well, it's why I love the fact that you're here and what you represent. One of my favorite quotes is Maimonides. I have to explain Maimonides to non-Jewish audiences, but philosopher, doctor, who once said, each of us should view ourselves if the world were held in balance, and any single act of goodness on our part could tip the scales. And I believe that. And I think you have to have that in your mind. I was the head of J&F in St. Paul many years ago. And I went through my federation fundraising training, and of course, when we raise money, and in my business, you raise money. And I learned, and it's true, that when I'm asking you for a contribution, it's not to help me. This is something for you. This is important to you. And so as we kind of get out there at the local level, we have to have a mindset, one, that our actions can change the world, can tip the balance. And so individual action really makes a difference. And by the way, particularly at the local level, because you never know when that, first of all, things happen at local levels, city councils, mayors, community groups. And many of those folks, by the way, ultimately become senators. And so, you don't miss the opportunity, starting in the grassroots, starting at home, to understand that, one, this issue is important. And it's important not just for me, but it's important for you. It's important for our community. It's important for our kids. It's important for our sense of kind of humanity, of who we are, that the things we can do to lessen the hate and lessen the anger are really going to make a difference in our lives, in our kids' lives. So I am a great believer in kind of grassroots community action. There's a lot that happens on Capitol Hill. You can come out here, you can come Federation, you come with AIPAC, you come with RJC or the Democratic Council, whatever. Come, do your stuff on the Hill. But please, don't all of a sudden kind of, when you get back home, kind of put that away and box it until your next, venture to the Hill. It's when you're home that you really have to kind of roll up your sleeves and reach out and talk to those city council members and talk to those community leaders, and talk to your neighbors, talk to your family, and for them to understand the importance of what is happening here and what we must do to make sure that bad things don't continue to happen.
Thank you for that. What are some great tools to use? People have talked about missions. People have done local advocacy. What works? What have we not thought of that maybe you've seen elsewhere?
Well, first of all, social media. So I think you have to understand that and figure out how folks are communicating. I mean, my kids don't watch. When I grew up, too young here, it was Walter Cronkite. There were 3 news stations that you watched. And then that changed, and you got cable, and that changed. And now, I mean, my kids don't watch the evening news. They don't. And there's another generation behind them. And so you have to figure out what are the communication forums that are being used to reach out to young people. And by the way, to not just young people, seniors. And figure out how to use those. Missions, by the way, are really important. I mean, are you energized being here? Does it kind of, right? You gotta. I mean, I worked in that Capitol. Every day that I went to work, I have to tell you, my heart just kind of, I filled with a sense of awe. I'm originally from Brooklyn, by the way. Kid from Brooklyn, can grow up and United States Senator representing the state of Minnesota, the United States Senate. Pretty stunning. So coming here is part of it, and part of it is to get your juices flowing. Okay. By the way, go to Israel. I don't know. It's really important. Go to Israel and see what's going on there, and get a sense of the topography and understand kind of the dangers that Israel faces, its very existence, and the energy that's going on. And so those are the things that get you energized. Yeah. That's to put gas in the tank. But then after that, I keep coming back to the same message of what you can do at home. Letters to the editor. People still kind of read papers online, but they're still doing that. Blogs. Engage in the conversation. Don't let it challenge those folks who are spewing out hate. Challenge them, and come in with a message of who we are. Proud to be a Jew. Proud to be a Jew. And understanding that we really do think that that's in our DNA to repair the world, to make this a better place. And so if I'd look for every kind of channel, a way to kind of proclaim that, to express it, to show it. And in the end, I think you're going to gather folks around. And by the way, some of you should simply run for office. Okay? I mean, it is challenging. Okay, and I got to tell you, when you're running for national law, you're running for senator, after watching, I'd probably $20 million spent trying to kill me. I'd have breakfast in the morning. I'd wonder if my kids still like me, because I didn't like that guy that I saw on TV. All those commercials. And so, but you need people to be able to raise their hand, to be a Jackie Rosen, to be a Ted Deutsch, to be a James Langford, to be Norm Coleman. And so just, be prepared to put yourself out there knowing that you may take shots along the way. You could probably make more money in the private side, but don't be afraid to do public service so that your voice can be heard and so you can be part of the solution rather than just simply watching the problem.
I have a question in mind, but what you said was so meaningful to me. Just one personal vignette. I was born in the Soviet Union, and I worked in the Capitol. And I remember asking my grandfather one time if he thought I should have gone into business instead, and he said, "This is why I sacrificed my life, because as a Jew and as a woman, you would have never done this job back in the old country." And so it's a country where we can achieve.
And my first demonstrations that I recall, aside from my demonstrations in the 60s when my hair was down to here, but my demonstrations in the 80s was demonstrating in Washington, I think my first trip to Washington was a rally for Soviet Jewry, like in 1980, free the Jews in the Soviet Union. And today you stand here and I have many friends who, in the end, wouldn't. I was with Nathan Sharansky just this morning.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you. Any words of wisdom given your conversations this morning?
So we had Ted Joyce was at that, a Republican Jewish Coalition, Democratic Council, folks both sides of the aisle. Again, I think we need to be candid that there are challenges today in the political world and part of my thing is we each have to look in our own corner and recognize there are challenges. So it is on the left, it's a little different. On the right, we've got the crazies out there. Within the party, Israel is still you go in front of a Republican gathering, you say, I stand for Israel, that's an applause line. It's not always on the D side today. And so, most of our community are Democrats. And so for those of you who are Democrats and who care about Israel and want to fight anti-Semitism, I applaud your courage. You've got a battle, but if you've got leaders here, like Jackie Rose and Deutsch and others in Minnesota, Dean Phillips, great member of Congress. And so, we need folks on both sides of the aisle with the courage. And I want to stress that courage. It takes courage to stand up. And this is not an easy issue. Yeah. Okay? It's not an easy issue. It needs to be done in a bipartisan way. We need to come together. We need to put aside partisan divides. I can disagree with Dean Phillips about economic policy, but I stand united foursquare in doing everything I can to make sure that we end the scourge of anti-Semitism. So both sides of the aisle go forth and do great things. In the end, we really can make this a better world. So thank you all.
Sarah Coleman, thank you. Thank you so very much. Just so you know, we hope that all of these people sign up to be our volunteer advocacy corps and to take your words to heart. Great. Thank you so very much.